What's up, everybody? Welcome to the main card minute 10-minute bet breakdown for UFC Vegas 90. Brendan Allen versus Chris Curtis 2. We are back at the UFC APEX for another lackluster 6-fight main card. But we got UFC 300 next weekend, all right? So we got something to look forward to. But let's get into this card. First fight of the night, we got Trevor Peek taking on Charlie Campbell. Both very similar age. Peek is 29, Campbell's 28. Both love to finish fights by knockout. Trevor Peek, 9 professional wins, 8 of them coming by knockout. Charlie Campbell, on the other hand, 8 professional wins, 6 of them coming by knockout. Charlie Campbell did win his UFC debut by knockout in the first round. Trevor Peek, 2-1 in the UFC, won his UFC debut by knockout in the first round. Weirdly, his last 2 fights went to decision, and I say weirdly because the dude came into the UFC 7-0 with 7 knockouts. So, little surprised to see his fights go long there. Personally, I think someone's lights is going out in this one, and I don't really know who. So I'm just going to take fight does not go the distance. There is a huge price tag on it. It is minus 550. We're obviously going to parlay it. We're not taking it straight up. But if you guys are looking for some plus money singles to take, how about these? The over 1.5. I just mentioned that Peek's last 2 fights have gone the distance. The over 1.5 is plus 145. So if you think it's going to go long, maybe it's going to be a back and forth war. Solid on that. If you think Charlie Campbell's going to win, he's probably going to win by knockout. Why take him at minus money? Just add the knockout there, plus 145, Campbell by KO. And if you think Trevor Peek is going to win, it'll probably be by knockout, but why even bother putting the money on that? He's a dog right now, plus 180. Solid value on all 4 of those. Next fight of the night, we got a Valter Walker, which is like the funnest name to say, against Lukasz Brzeski. Not only is Valter Walker a fun name to say, but this dude calls himself the Clean Monster. I'm not saying if you call yourself the Clean Monster, you do steroids, but this dude does all the steroids. Like, there's no way. You don't call yourself that, whatever. Anyways, UFC debut. He's 11-0, 7 wins by finish. Taking on Lukasz Brzeski, who came into the UFC looking like a killer. He's never won a fight in the UFC. He is 0-3 in the UFC. 2 of those have gone the distance, though. That's important. I'll get to that in a minute. 3 of Walker's last 5 have hit the over 1.5, and 4 of Brzeski's last 5 have hit the over 1.5. That's important because we're taking the over 1.5. It is minus 120 right now. We're going to parlay it with that first fight of the night to not go the distance. That brings us to plus 117 on that parlay. Really happy with that. If you guys are looking for anything else to take, again, it would be a parlay piece because it's minus money, but Walker by finish. I just mentioned 7 of his 11 wins coming by finish. Brzeski did just get knocked out in the first round in his last fight. So you could argue he's a little chinny. But Brzeski might be a live dog here. Hear me out. He's 0-3 in the UFC, but you got 3 solid fights of UFC competition against this unknown Valter Walker, who sure could be a killer, but also if he is the clean monster and he's actually clean, could be a fucking loser too, man. I don't know. I'm just saying, Brzeski plus 250. I feel like there's value there. If you guys think it's going to go long, which I do, but longer than I think, at over 2.5, that is plus 150. I think any of those are worth taking. Brzeski might be a stretch, but I kind of like him in that fight. Either way, next fight of the night, we got Ignacio Bahamondes. Speaking of fun-ass names to say, Ignacio Bahamondes taking on Christos Giagos. Bahamondes, his last 9 fights have hit the over 1.5. Giagos, 10 of his last 15 have hit the over 1.5. I'm mentioning that because you guessed it, we're taking the over 1.5. It is minus 160. Let's break these guys down a little bit. Ignacio, if you guys remember, he had that sick spinning wheel kick over Roosevelt Roberts. It was in 2021. Dude, I think it won knockout of the year. If you haven't seen that, please go back and watch that. In my head, he's very impressive because of that. I'm like, oh yeah, Bahamondes, he's really good. I'm looking back at his record now. First of all, he's only 3-2 in the UFC, which is kind of crazy. His 2 losses, Ludovic Klein, John Makdessi. Okay. His wins, Roosevelt Roberts, Zhu Rong, and Trey Ogden. Really not the most impressive names. Christos Giagos, on the other hand, this is his second stint in the UFC. He went 1-2 in his first stint, and here he is again going 5-5 this time. I just want to talk about his losses for a second. His first stint in the UFC, his 1 and 2, his 2 losses, Gilbert Burns, Chris Wade. By the way, left the UFC after that to lose to Josh Emmett. These are big names, big names. Comes back to the UFC. His 5 losses since coming back. Charles Oliveira, Drakkar Klose, Arman Sarukian, Thiago Moises, and Daniel Zellhuber. Zellhuber probably the least, worthy on that list, but all those other ones are fucking killers, dude. He's really fought the best of the best, and here's Bahamondes, who's been and not beaten anyone that great. Giagos might be a live dog here. I'm not even going to tell you to take it because I do think Bahamondes wins. As I mentioned, he had that sick KO over Roosevelt Roberts. Bahamondes by KO is plus 185. I mean, he's got 14 wins and 9 of them have come by knockout. So I think there's a solid chance there. If you also think he's going to win by finish, because Giagos has been subbed 6 times. Bahamondes not the biggest, jiu-jitsu guy, but could get it done. That him by finish is minus 155, and the over 2.5, if you think it's going to go long, is plus 120. All right, next fight of the night, Morgan Charriere taking on Jose Mariscal. So Charriere, big on the Cage Warriors scene. Dude had like 15 fights in fucking Cage Warriors. Just won his UFC debut in the first round by knockout. That was back in France. This dude is French. Everyone loved him there. Huge crowd favorite. I do think that was a big factor in that fight. I think the momentum was on his side. And in the Apex, shit might not go down that smoothly. He's fighting Mariscal, who is 2-0 in the UFC. 10 of his 15 wins, though, have come by finish. Charriere, on the other hand, 14 of his 29 professional fights have gone the distance. So I do think this one goes long, and I think Charriere might be a little overhyped from his debut. I don't think he's that great because he's got fucking, what does he have? 9 losses on his career. It's not like he's some young prospect. He is 28. He's still young, but a lot of fights under his belt. If you guys are looking for something to take, I mentioned I'm taking the over 1.5. It is minus 325. I'm parlaying it with the over 1.5 from the fight before. That's plus 113. I'm going big on the over 1.5s on this card. If you guys are looking for anything else to take, over 2.5, still big minus money. But if you want to add it to a parlay, minus 185. Fight does not go the distance. As I mentioned, both of these guys can get it done by finish. That is plus 130. And I think Mariscal's a live dog. His line has been dropping like crazy. He opened at like plus 160. It's plus 110 now. So hop on that while you still can, because he ain't going to be a dog for long. Co-main event, we got Alexander Hernandez taking on Damon Action Jackson. So Alexander Hernandez had a weird UFC career, started off really, came in, just knocks out Benny Dariush real quick. But since then, been up and down. He's actually 6-6 in the UFC, which I thought was so surprising. I would have thought he had a winning record at least. And not only that, but in those 6 losses, he's been finished 4 of them. But almost half of his professional fights have gone the distance. Jackson, on the other hand, also had 2 stints in the UFC. I say also because I mentioned Giagos before. The weirdest first stint: 1 loss, 1 draw, 1 no contest. Cut. Comes back. He's 5-3 since coming back. He's looked pretty good, but he is chinny. He did just lose to Dan Ige and Billy Q back to back. He lost to Ilya too, but we're not going to fault him for losing to Ilya. I'm taking the over 1.5 here. I mentioned I'm loving the over 1.5 in this. It's a minus 160. We're going to parlay it. If you're looking for anything else to take, Hernandez by finish is plus 100. Jackson money line as a dog, why not? Plus 170. And if you think it's going long, the over 2.5 is plus 145. Main event, we got Brendan Allen taking on Chris Curtis in the rematch from 2021. Chris Curtis knocked him out in the second round. Not only that, that was Brendan Allen's last loss, dude. He's 6-0 since then, and his last 4 fights, he's finished by sub. This makes me nervous as hell. He's looked really good since losing to Chris Curtis. And Chris Curtis has just been through wars, man. He has had 42 professional fights. Most of them go long, I will say, unless he knocks the guy out. So that's, I mean, the theme of this card is over 1.5, man. On 5 of the 6 fights, I'm taking over 1.5. So you guessed it, main event, over 1.5, minus 310. Parlaying it with the co-main over 1.5, that is a plus 115. If you guys are looking for anything else to take, Allen by sub is plus money, dude. I just mentioned 4 wins in a row by sub. Not only that, but 5 of his last 6 by sub. Not only that, but 14 of his 23 wins by sub. That's plus 115. Curtis as a live dog. He already won the first fight. Curtis money line plus 182, or the over 3.5 if you think it's going long, plus 115. All right, that does it, guys. Thanks for watching and enjoy the fights.